Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. I will start by congratulating everybody here on day 3 of the conference for being here, being awake. So my name is Kim Caldwell. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Sitetracker. So quick piece of me is I've been about 20 years in the compliance, construction, and critical infrastructure industry, really supporting customers and companies in order to scale and adopt on the systems and the technology that they choose to use. All right. Okay, so before we get started, I'd love to set the stage just a little bit on what we're going to talk about today, give you a quick overview of where we're headed. So first I'll set up by looking at the key trends that are shaping clean energy. Next, we'll explore the top 5 challenges. Third, we'll start sharing some lessons from the field and the customers that we deal with and things that have been shared with us on a regular basis. And finally, we'll close with a few takeaways, hopefully giving you some ideas, or at least reiterating ideas you've already had on how you can help your teams. We'll see. All right, so part of why I get to be up here is this is just a quick take of some of the customers that we do support today with Sitetracker. So, quick snapshot, owners, operators, and contractors who are building and maintaining the critical infrastructure behind our energy transition. Here's a quick peek at our EV partnerships. And then lastly, here's a quick peek at renewables. This is sometimes where we get asked when we show these on paper to people of, oh, introduce me to that person or introduce me to this person. So that's a fun part of my job that I get to do is some of the networking aspect of it. All right, so let's quickly dive in. Probably not something that I'm going to tell you that's new. I think that I've heard probably in every conversation that I've had throughout the last 3 days is we have to move faster, we have to do more, we have to do it with less. So I see a few nodding heads. I think that probably resonates. So quickly diving into that for our content. To start, we'll talk about the current state of our space. In the past year and a half, we've reached over $1 trillion yes, over $1 trillion. I had to double check myself because I keep thinking billion. So in investments into the renewable energy space. So last year was $730 billion. This year we've already hit $390 billion, putting us on pace to exceed last year. Global policy trends remain supportive of renewables, although we all know the US has been a little bit volatile. So clear takeaway here is demand to build is high. Expectations to protect those investments through rigorous O&M and asset management are equally as high. All right, so first some obstacles. I think I just said this earlier, is doing more with less. We have labor constraints, efficiency gaps, and thin margins. So it's that piece where we continually hear, how do we make sure that we are cutting what we're spending and doing more with the tools that we have? So quite a few of the conversations I've also had and seen across multiple industries that we work with isn't just, I need all these new tools to support what my team is doing. It's how do I use these tools better today? How do I get more efficient in them? How do I deal with my partners? So AI has been a topic I'm sure we've all talked about the last few days, is people are turning to their partners to say, how are you doing AI today? What are you doing in your system? How do we use it instead of going and trying to find 5 more tools to add to our tool stack? Managing complexity at scale, that gets really fun. So the more complex it gets, the more difficult it gets to manage. Spreadsheets for managing a couple projects, or maybe one project isn't as bad as managing a couple projects. Timelines have accelerated. I know we've all had that and felt that pain, especially in the last couple of months. Maintaining long-term performance, so how do we make sure that the assets that we deploy, that we can support them and maintain them for years to come? As well as data and system fragmentation. We all know the fun of when you're trying to find a spreadsheet, but also when you're trying to find the information amongst multiple spreadsheets, it can be a little bit of a challenge, or a lot of a challenge. Making sure I'm pacing myself with the click here and the click here. All right, so jumping into success patterns, probably the meat of what we are going to talk about is how people are doing some of these things and achieving the 5, I guess, alleviating the pains that we just discussed at the 5 points. All right, so not naming names, a lesson from one of our top 3 US EV CPOs. Obstacles and success patterns, so we're going to compare the two. Really quickly, we're going to talk through the universal challenges that we see through the customer base. One we just talked on is the spreadsheet piece, so relying on those spreadsheets and the manual reporting. I did have somebody that was talking about reports with me that said, you know, it's great to have the information, it's great to be able to find it, but trying to find it in any quick manner is a challenge. And as you're scaling your business, as you're trying to prevent, or as you're trying to share that information with board or with other leaders or with the internal teams as you're trying to scale your business, it needs to be something that you can readily have available. Within the EV charging sector, as an example, one of the top 3 EV charging providers in the US had an incredibly ambitious goal. So their goal is to expand from hundreds of thousands of charging stations to millions globally. And at the same time, they were trying to win contracts to electrify the entire shipping and delivery fleets. So growth opportunities were massive, but operations weren't set up to handle it. So that may resonate with some of you. It's any growing business, it's great that we have the business. Now how do we actually go execute and do it? So obstacles will sound probably pretty familiar. So reliance on spreadsheets, which we talked about briefly. Project data being fragmented, so having it in different systems and different tools, not having one source of truth. They lacked portfolio-wide visibility. So one of the top things that we will typically hear, and you may as well, is how do I know what I don't know? So having one system to be able to see those types of things and bring up that information will help you see that. And finally, when you manage global expansion on the foundation, scaling feels scary and almost impossible. So fun part, important part, is how do they overcome it? So I think you'll see the bullets over here is standardizing the processes across projects, which also can feel like a massive challenge in any business. It's that change management aspect, but putting the standard out there of how are we going to operate as a business versus we've always operated this way or we started operating this way. So they standardized their project process across the teams and the contractors, so everybody was working in the same way. Let's see. So centralized data and people into one system of record was the other piece. And they had a 10,000-foot view of that day-to-day task. Automated key workflows from reporting to financials, and then the results became faster deployments. So if you're able to do those types of pieces, faster time to revenue, better forecasting, the ability to complete things, all things that we all want as businesses that are out there, but it's how do we actually execute on that? Not just EV charging, we see this across multiple different companies that we work with, and that's what we're seeing drive the success. So I've got another example for you, probably about 3 more examples for you. I will get better at this, maybe by the end of the presentation, probably. So one of the themes that we hear over and over, and you'll probably hear it through all of the success stories, is doing more with less. How do we become efficient? How do we make sure we're taking the processes and standardizing them? So great example is a US energy storage developer, again, nameless intentionally, but they had 2 main points that were pain points. So asset and project tracking lived in spreadsheets, which quickly became unreliable as the portfolio grew. So it's something that, again, we can manage in a spreadsheet for smaller projects. The bigger you get as a company, the more complex that you get as a company, the more difficult it becomes when you've got those spreadsheets, data's getting overwritten, you're managing it in different places. Individuals have their own examples of it. Second, their teams were working in silos. So we've all seen how that happens. Communication is the most difficult thing with any company, but also when you're working in this silo. Development, asset management, finance, operations, each had their different tools and workflows. Makes it a little difficult for executives to get visibility into what they need to oversee their businesses. So what they changed, I know you're going to be shocked, is they implemented Sitetracker. But when they did so, it shifted from being disconnected and gave them one place and a unified end-to-end lifecycle approach. So centralizing the project and asset data, losing people already, gave them a single source of truth globally for the team. So again, not just unique to storage, I think we showed that a little bit earlier too, with the EV charging, solar, EV charging, fiber utilities. Anytime there's complexity that scales fast and customers are managing that, it's because they're centralizing and automating the data, centralizing and automating their data. All right, one more example after this one. So accelerating timelines. Project delays. I mean, we've typically will see that occur because the data is in different places. So talking about customers with their biggest challenges, one of the themes that we see come up again and again is timelines. Everyone wants to move faster. How do we do this faster? How do we get more effective? How do we get paid quicker? And whether it's installing EV charging, building their networks, or deploying renewable energy, they're often held back by the tools that they're using to manage the project. Example, so a European utility company that's expanding into the EV charging space, super aggressive goal. I think we talked about this briefly earlier, is deploying thousands of charging points across Spain and Portugal just in a few years. Reliance on Excel was slowing everything down. They were losing track of inventory, projects were delayed because they didn't have any accurate milestones. Accountability was really tough when they didn't have who was managing what piece and then the handoffs that went with it in an appropriate timeline. Customers weren't getting timely updates. To make matters worse, the team was spending tens of hours a week just consolidating spreadsheets and trying to get reports. When they moved to Sitetracker, the game changed. They're able to have every project standardized with milestones and management of those milestones with more than 75 key stages tracked in one system. So real-time dashboards replaced manual reporting. Leadership and field teams had instant visibility into progress versus having to ask teams or ask for multiple different spreadsheets. And then the impact was clear to them: faster installs, faster time to revenue. Again, you're going to hear this theme, and less wasted time and effort. So broader lesson that we're seeing across the industry is if you want accurate timelines, you have to eliminate the bottlenecks and standardize your milestones, your data, and automate your reporting. All right. So maintaining performance. This is a top 5 US solar developer. So again, without naming names, we're helping you get there. But one of the most common challenges that we see with our customers in maintaining any type of performance as the portfolio grows is to manage a few projects well. So when project managers are juggling 10 to 15 or even 20 projects, it starts to slip if the systems aren't in place because you're managing too much information in too many different places and trying to track all of it. So exactly the situation that we had that was a US solar and storage developer. Their teams were using manual data processes in a patchwork of different systems. Tracking multiple schedules across different projects was really difficult. Communication with field resources was not consistent because everybody was operating in a different manner. And forecasting wasn't reliable. So we didn't know when projects were going to be done, which is a problem. Reporting was scattered, and they really never had a single accurate view of the performance itself. So solution was again to centralize. One of the top things that they added was Connect Portal, and it was to better serve their customers and reports and dashboards so they could get that clear view, but it was also to make sure that those that they were working with in a third-party format did have the same processes that they were using as a company. All right. So I'm going to skip over this one because I think you've heard me say it 3 or 4 times now. But data and system fragmentation obviously is a problem. So getting everything into one consistent, reliable space is going to be one of those field game changers. All right. So what good looks like, another acronym because I know you want one, so WGLO. Standardize early, invest in data visibility, and then align across the full asset lifecycle. Here's your actions, probably the point that you actually care about in this presentation, which is fair. I usually go to that too, is proof is in the headlines, right? So going back to the very first slide, this is something that we continue to hear over and over. The demand for clean energy is continuing to grow across the globe. Everything that we're seeing is about the growth within this space, the belief in this space, the concern from CEOs in this space, and how to keep up. So task at hand right now is it's not necessarily the question of whether we have the tools, it's whether we can deploy them efficiently. So just because the speed at which we can remove the boundaries and the bottlenecks of operational bottlenecks and scale clean energy solutions will determine how fast we can truly make the impact on climate goals. Oh, that's good when I leave it. I told you I'd get it by the very end. We're almost there. All right, So I think I mentioned this is with CEOs expecting digital transformation, it's fundamentally changing how businesses operate and compete. Right now it's that piece of how do we keep up? How do we understand how AI is going to change our business? It's a buzzword that we all hear, but we maybe don't understand or can't articulate how it's truly going to impact our business today. The digital transformation is a top priority. You'll see that 77% of CEOs expect it to change how they operate today and compete. Similarly, Deloitte's summer CEO survey highlights that while they're optimistic about the organization's performance, many see digital transformation as a critical tool for navigating uncertainties, such as geopolitical instability and inflation. And almost half the CEOs are already integrating generative AI into their operations to drive growth and innovation, reflecting that broader commitment to digital initiatives. All right, it's that theme again. So how do we transform that chaos to order? So as we look this, you'll see through here, it's centralizing your data, standardizing your processes, and optimizing your resources. We currently stand on the cusp of the most profound industrial revolution in human history. The critical infrastructure, including our power and telecommunications grids, are deeply insufficient to handle the demands of the oncoming decades. The imperative is solving these insufficiencies lies in the pace at which we're able to deploy the upgrades and the expansions. A couple other pieces here is just walking through managing all of these pieces in one. Overall, as a company, what we typically have seen is a reduction of 41% average portfolio, or an increase in project and portfolio growth. With construction, it's been a 31% reduction in project timeline. O&M, 79% of projects were completed without rework, which is huge. And then 5.5 hours saved reporting on average, which if you compound that on a regular basis is an incredible amount of time, but also a resource. If you have somebody that's dedicated just to pulling that reporting together, it is something where you can make that more efficient and then save on your operational costs. All right, so walking back through some of the points that we've made today, just realizing the value through the consistent points that we've had. We'd love to talk to you more if you want to stop at our booth. We are still here today and we'll be here tomorrow. Some of our team will. So we'd love to have you stop by the booth, ask more questions about how you can centralize your data, or just talk to us about the industry in general. I'd love to take your questions off stage. I know there is somebody coming up after me and we'll give them a little bit of time to prepare. So thank you so much.